The Stormy Daniels pay to cover up the affair hush money case. This is the only one that's going to go to trial before the election? Really? It wasn't supposed to be the first one. Remember what was going to be the first one? What was going to be the first one was a trial of Donald Trump for the big issue, right? For him trying to throw out the results of the 2020 election so he could stay in power even though he lost. Prosecutors asked the judge to start this trial 2 months ago. The first trial date they asked for was in early March 2024. That was going to be first. What happened to that? Well, when it emerged, January 2021, that there was a recording of Trump live on the phone demanding that Georgia officials falsify the election results and declare him the winner. When everybody heard that tape, everybody over the age of 0 in this country knew that there would have to be a criminal investigation of that. I mean, that very much sounded like the commission of a very obvious crime on tape. The district attorney in the county where the phone call took place then opened that criminal investigation. Of course she did. How could she not have? But then what happened, right? They opened the floodgates on her in a way that is underappreciated in this country. First thing they did, Republicans in the state legislature decided that for the first time in the history of that state, they needed to give themselves a new power. They needed to give themselves the power to remove prosecutors from their jobs, even in the middle of a case. Now, Republicans in the Georgia state legislature never wanted that power before now in the whole history of the state. But now that Trump's under investigation for a crime, now they want that new power. This new law giving themselves that power, they passed it in such a rush, it suffered from what you might charitably call constitutional infirmities. They then had to pass it again, so they did. And in so doing, they created a board with all Republican appointees. It has a brand new power under the laws of the state of Georgia to discipline and remove prosecutors in the middle of their cases. A power they never had before, never wanted before, not before Fani Willis brought a case against Donald Trump. But that was only the start. Led by one of the Republicans who served as a fake elector in Georgia, Republicans in that state then formed a Georgia Senate Special Committee on Investigations. Oh, what investigations are they wanting to do? They are specifically investigating Fani Willis. They formed a new committee just for that purpose. The head of that new committee to investigate Fani Willis went to the Georgia State Republican Convention this weekend to brag about how he's about to subpoena her, to testify under oath and force her to hand over evidence to the Republicans in the Georgia State Senate. They're characterizing it as a financial concern. But he's been very explicit that the financial concern he has is that she's expending financial resources on the Trump prosecution. Republicans at the county level in Georgia are now saying they want to put her office through an audit. A Republican member of Congress from Georgia has filed an ethics complaint against her. The Republican chairman of the House Judiciary Committee in Washington, Republican Congressman Jim Jordan, has opened an investigation of her in Washington as well and has subpoenaed her and is now threatening to hold her in contempt of Congress, threatening to put her in jail. And now 2 Republican U.S. senators are jumping in as well. Senators Ron Johnson and Chuck Grassley, just announcing a few days ago that they, too, are going to open a new investigation of this Georgia prosecutor, Fani Willis, this time opening this investigation in the United States Senate. They have created a maelstrom of political harassment and pressure, bringing it down to bear on this one prosecutor like a laser, because she brought this case against someone of their party who has political power. This is Republicans using their political power to try to shut off the legal system, to try to shut off the rule of law here so it cannot be used against their guy, against Trump. Let's get real about this and take it seriously. Because what's going on here is they are taking apart the judicial system. They are fundamentally changing the judiciary in the state, in the entire state, all to protect this one powerful defendant in their own party, whom she had the temerity to charge. Fani Willis is ably defending herself. She is good at this. And she knew what she was walking into. But this story for all of us, this is not a profile in courage. This is a profile in cowardice. This is a profile in failure and neglect by us, by the country. Because the reason she is out there defending herself so ably is because nobody else is defending her. She's standing alone against all of this. The rule of law depends on the people who enforce it being able to enforce it, even when those who are implicated in a legal proceeding are powerful people. These are human beings. They are not magic. They are not bulletproof. They are not superhuman. And right now, they have no one defending them as they are being asked to bear superhuman pressure and threat. And I get it that there is a sort of good faith instinct against defending these folks, right? For Americans who believe in the independence and professionalism of the judiciary, why step up politically and defend a judge or a prosecutor? That's supposed to be a non-political part of our system, right? Right, true. But here, in reality, in this era of this Republican Party, there is a ton of inappropriate political pressure, improper, craven, pretextual, dishonest intimidation being brought to bear on prosecutors and on judges from the right, from the allies of the former president. And it is working. And there has been no significant countervailing pressure defending them. If you go after a judge's family, if you demonize a prosecutor and bring bogus allegations and charges against them, it is you who are breaking the American legal system, and you ought to be the one who pays for that. I mean, thus far, what's the price been? Other than getting heckled by fed-up New Yorkers on the sidewalk sometimes, the Republicans who are waging war on the legal system, proclaiming the illegitimacy of the legal system on behalf of Donald Trump. Up until now, they are paying no cost for it. The rule of law in this country, in practical terms, is made up of people doing hard jobs who themselves can break when they are attacked. And right now, you and I, all of us, we are making history in this country. And the history that we are making is that there's no one defending Fani Willis but herself. And in the, noble alternate version of this history that we'd like to imagine we would be part of, the whole country would be up in arms about Georgia and about New York and about all of these cases, telling these people to back off the judges, back off the witnesses and the jurors, back off the prosecutors, back off Fani Willis, protect these cases, protect the rule of law. We imagine that's who we are as a country, but we are not showing it. We are not standing up to defend these people. At least, not yet. Let me start by asking you about what your life has been like and how things have changed over the course of this past year. I know you have bodyguards. I know you had to leave your home because of ongoing threats against you. I saw footage last week at an event honoring the South Fulton police. You got a little bit emotional, thanking the police for having kept you safe in what has been a remarkably threatening environment for you. I wondered what effect the sort of constant threat of violence that you've been living with has had on you and on your ability to do your work.
Thank you for asking. Not many people ask about what is the personal journey that's been going on. And it really hasn't been happening in the last year. It's been happening since about a month after I took office. From the time I took office, I began to get threats. Those threats come in the way of emails. Those threats come in the way of phone calls, text messages, any which way you can imagine. At some point, the threats became where I had to leave my home. And I've been out of my home since the first year in office. They've come from a variety of sources. One of the first things that ever happened was there was a protest at my house at 5 o'clock in the morning. People mad because the last administration had left police cases, lots of them, and they wanted immediate action on them. And so that was the first thing that kind of happened. But the threats have certainly been about lots of different kinds of cases that I've prosecuted. People are very unhappy with them because of some recent cases that most of them are racial in nature. It has cost me to leave my home financially. I'm paying for, my mortgage because I refuse to give up the home where I raise my children, but also paying for another establishment. And I have 24-hour really protection around me. So it's a very interesting way to live, but it's well worth it. to have the honor of being the first female district attorney in Fulton County, it pales in comparison to what my victims are going through. And the reality is, one of the reasons we are upsetting people is we are so successful here in Fulton County. I have the third largest crime drop in America. We have it because we're taking a balanced approach, both unapologetically going after gangs and violent criminals and anyone who should violate the law in my county, but we're also doing programs. And so it has been a huge sacrifice, but it's well worth it for my community.
We spoke, you did an interview with me earlier in your tenure, and we talked about what it was like to become a national lightning rod and to attract not just all the attention that a district attorney in a big place like Fulton County is always going to get locally for all of the important issues that affect the people of Fulton County, but to become a household name around the country, including by people who decided they were going to make your life hell for having brought one particularly very high-profile case. Do you feel like you've changed over the course of this term in office, over the course of this 4 years, in terms of having to develop new skills, new resources, develop a thicker skin than you might not have expected when you took this case when you ascended to office January 1st, 2020?
This job has certainly made me closer to God because you have to go into prayer often. So that's just the truth. So that's a positive, right? When you're getting closer to God. But I can't explain to you how much I love the work that I do. I can't explain to you how loved I feel by my community. You really should feel sorry for those that are trying to deter me from my work. It doesn't do anything but motivate me to continue to work and to work hard. And so I'm not someone that's going to be broken, but certainly it has caused me to get thicker skin or to be more resilient, to dig deeper, to work harder. But what it has not done is deter me from my work.
Let me ask you about an interesting development that happened with a former Democratic governor of Georgia, Governor Roy Barnes. It emerged over the course of the Trump case and some of the forgive me, the mishigas around that, that you had asked Governor Barnes if he would consider joining the prosecution as special counsel in that case. And it emerged that he said no, saying, quote, "I wasn't going to live with bodyguards for the rest of my life," which is a commentary on what it takes to be part of the legal system in this era, taking on politically powerful people. But Governor Barnes, as far as I understand it, has since offered that if the Republican-controlled legislature in Georgia comes after you with this new investigative committee that they seem to have formed specifically to come after you, with some of the other ways that they seem to be targeting you, that if you need legal representation of a specialty form as part of the way they're coming after you through the legislature, that he will represent you in those matters. I just wanted to ask if that's your understanding and what you make of that, those interactions that you've had with former Governor Barnes.
No, Governor Barnes is my attorney. They have decided in Georgia that they would like to come over after me. They use false reasons for wanting to come after me. I don't know if you remember, and I believe we talked about it last time. Georgia had never had a prosecutorial oversight committee, and all of a sudden, 14 minorities were elected to office to serve as district attorney. And now all of a sudden they need an oversight committee to look after district attorneys because they want to tell us how to prosecute and who to prosecute and where we should put our resources, as opposed to allowing the voters that put us in these seats to make those determinations. The voters in my community are very clear that they want crime rid out of their communities, but they want it done both by removing violent offenders, which is what we have done. We've gone after gangs and we've worked with our police departments to do so. But they also want second chances for low-level offenders, and we have done those programs. What is so ironic is although it's only 14 of the 50 DAs in the state of Georgia, most of the citizens report to our jurisdictions. So although we're smaller in number than the other 36, most of the population has elected these minority DAs to serve them and has trusted their judgment. But apparently we now need Daddy to tell us how to do our job.
A man has been indicted by a federal grand jury for allegedly threatening Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis. The U.S. Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Georgia says the man railed against D.A. Willis's prosecution of former President Donald Trump in YouTube live streams. At one point, he's accused of saying D.A. Willis will, quote, be killed like a dog. He's set to be formally arraigned in Atlanta next month.
California man indicted earlier this month is the second person to face federal criminal charges for threatening to kill Fulton County DA Fani Willis. The first was a man from Alabama. Together, they represent a small fraction of the threats that Fani Willis has received in the 9 months since she began prosecuting Donald Trump and in the couple of years since she first started investigating that matter. She travels with bodyguards. She's been forced to leave her home. All this while former President Trump continues to attack her relentlessly to his supporters. And as Republicans at the county, state, and federal level do everything they can to undermine and impugn and stymie her work and smear her personally. This level of sustained public attack is not usually the price of entry for doing your job as a district attorney, nor should it be in a country where the rule of law is supposedly the rule. The ability of prosecutors and judges to do their jobs without fear is a fundamental test of our democracy. Whether you like the Georgia criminal case against former President Trump or not, Fani Willis is one of the bellwethers for the rule of law in this country. Back with us now is the Fulton County District Attorney, Ms. Willis. Ms. Willis, I was interested to see in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution today, there were 3 Democratic state senators who published an opinion piece saying, quote, we are witnessing a concerted effort by Trump and MAGA Republican politicians to cast doubt on the legitimate and strong Fulton County election interference case by attacking the prosecutor. It's an effort that takes advantage of every avenue of government power to which Trump's allies have access. Their goal, delay accountability for Trump's alleged attempt to illegally overturn a presidential election. This strikes me very close to my heart because I feel like this is one of the first times I've seen people standing up for you on this point. I wanted to ask how it strikes you. Do you agree with their assessment of what's going on?
Well, as you know, let's start with the federal government and Jim Jordan. Mm-hmm. Jim Jordan has time after time after time attacked my office with no legitimate purpose. Anyone who knows Jim Jordan's history knows that he only has the purpose of trying to interfere in a criminal investigation. He has now turned his tricks to he's going to look at grant programs, which I invite him to do, and we have complied with his subpoenas, but yet he continues his attacks to try to interfere in a criminal investigation, while his jurisdiction has one of the worst crime rates, has poverty issues, and not one time has he used his position to try to investigate people who are attacking me and attacking others legitimately doing their jobs, making him illegitimate in his position, and it's disgusting. And so I bring that up at the federal level because now at the state level, they've decided to follow this clown's lead. And they want to now try to interfere in an investigation, and it's not legitimate either. And so it shall fail, and it's not going to go anywhere. But they are trying to attack me at every level. As you know, today is an exciting day for me because I'm on a ballot tomorrow, and I have a Democratic challenger, and I plan to win and win big tomorrow. But I also have a Republican challenger coming up in November who's unqualified, been practicing law for less than 4 years, has never practiced criminal law, but has already got PACs supporting her, already has the National the National Republican Party, as well as the local Republican Party supporting her. And so I am thankful to those 3 Democrats who stood up for what is right. But I am at a point where I need Fulton County voters to get out and vote. I need people around the country to support me, big and small, to say that we are going to be a country that still believes in the rule of law. We are not going to allow people to be attacked while they do their job. Having prosecutors that are free from interference and are allowed to just look at cases, look at the facts, and if people broke the law to bring charges, has to go on for us to live in a free society. The sad part, though, for all of them, Ms. Maddow, is it doesn't matter how many times they attack me. I am not going to be broken, and I am going to still be standing here doing my job lawfully.
Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis, I know it's a very busy time with the primary tomorrow and with everything going on in your life and the slings and arrows that you are dealing with. Thank you for being willing to talk with me and my audience tonight about this, and good luck to you. Stay safe.
Thank you.